you are going to need to know about things in multiple fields. So the more multiple fields you know about, the more likely you are to be able to juxtapose one against the other and find the association, the previously unknown association between those fields, the threads that link those two things. Another definition, the more standard definition, is to produce new and useful insight through imaginative skill. That's also a reasonable definition, but it does, to me, it doesn't get at the essence of it, which is associating previously unassociated fields. If I stay in finance, I may be very smart and I may come up with a bunch of useful ideas, but they won't be creative. I've got to go across fields if other people are going to say that's creative. So creativity is different from problem solving in my mind. Problem solving is a great thing. We all learn how to do it, and you know, I hope we're all quite good at it, and they're very effective. But creative solutions are insightful. We've talked a little bit about that. They're novel. They're simple. They're not wildly complicated structures. They're elegant, and their simplicity and elegance go together, and they're generative. That is to say that when you find one creative idea, it more or less, more often than not, triggers other creative ideas in the same kind of fashion. So when you come up with, I can make a point contact transistor, as they did in the Bell Labs in 1948, then all of a sudden you start thinking about, well, what if I had a bunch of these things and I can use it for memory, but gee, I could also use it for computing, and then I put it together, but then I'm going to need to program it, and all kinds of, you get a cascade effect that comes out of a truly creative idea. It's different from innovation because creativity, in my mind, is producing new ideas or actions, whereas innovation is applying new ideas and actions. So creativity is a precursor to innovation, but it's not the same as innovation. And it's different from discovery. Discovery, in my mind, is finding something new, and creativity is making something new. So many scientists are great at discovery, right? That doesn't mean they can make something new. It means they've discovered something new. I found 10 pounds on the floor. How unusual is that in New Haven to find 10 pounds on the floor, right? So that would be a discovery, but it wouldn't be creative in that sense. There's 6 stages in the creative process. There's preparation, which is everything we've done up until today. There's incubation, which is this mysterious period where Wallace didn't know what went on, but clearly something was happening because there was a difference between preparation and the next stage, which is illumination. And illumination happens in a flash. That's the blinding insight. And then you validate it. You show that you can do it twice. And then you show that you can do it 50 times. And then you put it into use. He didn't imagine this as this kind of process. It's not a sequential process, anything but a sequential process. You start off in preparation, you go into incubation. Actually, nothing happens in incubation. You go back to preparation, and then when you're least expecting it, you get an idea, and we'll talk about that. And then all of a sudden, nothing, you couldn't make it work again, and then you're back into incubation, and so you pop all over the place. So that's what he viewed it as. These dark blue areas are the areas of conscious thought. These green areas occur in unconscious thought. By the way, I would have thought the word would have been subconscious thought, but the official psychological word is unconscious thought. Arthur Koestler, the famous author, Hungarian, member of the Red Army when he was a teenager and then became a complete democracy advocate, wrote Darkness at Noon, great author, wrote a book called The Act of Creation, 600 pages long, great book to read, 200 pages on creativity and art, 200 pages on creativity and science, 200 pages on humor. And he viewed those 3 as the same thing. It's a really wonderful book and well worth the read. And he said, you know, you have 2 fields of knowledge and you find the juxtaposition of those two perspectives of thinking, and that's where you get the creative ideas. So, you know, it's the association of 2 previously unassociated fields. So let me give you an exercise here. I want you to associate previously unassociated fields. Here's a river. I want you to build a bridge over this river for cars. So in your mind, create this bridge. You got it? It'll look like this. Right. So what is this all about? Well, this is about a guy named Santiago Calatrava. who's one of the greatest architects, certainly the most expensive architect on the planet these days. That's him. He's Spanish. And what are the two fields he associates? I mean, one is bridges, obviously. The other is skeletons. And what are the skeletons? He studies the architecture of bones. And he knows the intimate shapes of all these bones, and he thinks they're absolutely gorgeous. And he uses these bones as structural components in his buildings, associating previously unassociated fields, in this case architecture and biology. He also loves bugs, as you'll see in a second, and he loves dinosaurs. So there's no apparent relationship between these, just he's interested in them. So he comes up with buildings that looks like this, which is a theater in St. Louis, I believe, and others that look like this. And then these great things that look like fly eyes. And is that a bug, or what is that? I mean, this is a warrior bug, right? He also likes mathematical functions. So there's another one, right? It's associating previously unassociated fields. This is the Oculus, which is being built now at the World Trade Center. Looks like a stegosaurus to me, sort of a stegosaurus. This is the oldest known association that I'm aware of. This is the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel. It's from the Aurignacian period of 32,000 BC. It's the head of a lion on the body of a man. Why would you want to do that, right? Well, if you're chasing lions and you occasionally saw your friend get eaten by one, you might like to have lion-like qualities, right? This was obviously developed by a man and not by a lion, so I can't explain it from the lion's point of view. But if you create these mythical, many mythical figures, are taking parts of different animals or different cultures and putting them together in order to give them superhuman powers, associating previously unassociated fields for a particular end product. So new solutions are often the combination of two or more existing concepts, as we've just talked in the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel. So if you had a video store, a videotape store, which would no longer exist, and you combine it with Amazon and Priority Mail, you get Netflix. And there are a lot of businesses that are built with these kinds of concepts. I think that it's all about the construction of associative networks of ideas. That's what you're really doing when you're creating a business. You're constructing associative networks of ideas. And they have to be, it's not just, a business is not one idea, it's many, many ideas. It's not about rearranging known elements, and it's not about improving known elements. It's about finding these structures, these hidden structures that were not that year. And recalling Kessler, Nabokov said, genius is finding the invisible link between things. And that's what this is all about, what creativity is all about, and what ventures are all about, is finding those invisible links between things. So hypnagogic is people who have their associations as they are falling asleep. Hypnopompic is people who have their associations as they are waking up. When you're falling asleep, you're going from a state of an orderly state to a disorderly state. When you're waking up, you're going from a disorderly state to an orderly state. I have all my ideas. I'm definitely hypnopompic. I've never had an idea as I'm falling asleep. First of all, I'm narcoleptic. I mean, it takes me about 0.4 microseconds to fall asleep. And my wife takes like 4 hours to fall asleep. And she takes 4 hours to wake up. I'm like that. But I don't wake up and get up. I wake up and I kind of daydream for maybe an hour, hour and a half sometimes. And if I get ideas, that's 99% of the ideas I get. And I get up and I run around the corner and I write them down and I go back to bed. I generally have about 3. They're small ideas. And I go back to bed and damn, the minute I lay down, I get another 3 ideas, right? And then I get up and I write them down and I go back and sometimes I get another set of 3. I don't know why they always come in sets of 3. For me, they come in sets of 3. I don't think there's anything important about that. And then I get up the next morning and I read those things. I can't read 7 of the 9. And then the remaining 2, at least 1 makes no sense whatsoever, and 1 may make some sense. So the productivity of this process for me is extremely low. On the other hand, if I go back and look over time, where have all my good ideas come from? That's where they've come from. And other people are like that as well. So they've actually tested this in Germany, something called the number reduction test. So they give you a series of numbers, and they give you an algorithm, completely made up nonsense algorithm. There's no math involved. They just made it up. And they said, if you take the first two numbers and you combine them, we want you to write down a 1. And then in the second stage, we want you to compare that 1 from the first two numbers with the third number. And if it's a 1 and a 4, we want you to call that a 9. And then we want you to complete that sequence with the algorithms we give you until you get to the final number. And so you go through this whole process and you combine these things and you finally get to the end. Lo and behold, the number at the end is 9. And what they do is they'll give you 50 of these and time how long it takes you, or they will give you half an hour and see how many you can do. So it's the rate at which you do these things, right? So what they don't tell you is there's a hidden algorithm in here. And the hidden algorithm is that the second number is always the last number. So if you figure that out, you can really fly through this thing, right? Because you don't have to complete it. You just have to do two numbers and you're there. But you have to recognize that algorithm. So they train you in the morning and they test you in the afternoon on how to do this. And in that case, about 25% of the people get the algorithm. And then they train you in the afternoon. They train a different group in the afternoon and they test them in the evening, and about 25% get it. And then they take another group and they train them in the evening and test them in the morning, and they get 60%. Almost triple, 2.5 times the productivity because of the associative mechanism of sleep. Do not waste that time, right? If you're exhausted at the end of the day, your day is not done. Your day isn't done until you're either going to sleep or waking up, one way or the other, particularly if you're interested in the creative sciences. So you'll see this reflected in the documents. It takes people of a certain personal quality as well. There are 3 qualities that I think and that the literature would suggest: curiosity, associative ability, and energy and productivity. In curiosity, ubiquitous interest. Interested in absolutely bloody everything, right, as opposed to a specialist. You have to have a love of exploring boundaries in the periphery. You have to focus on assumptions. You have to focus on flaws in systems and find them interesting. Continually drawing out the implications of what you're seeing. Open to new ideas. Loving ambiguity and a certain immaturity. All these things are kind of associated with curiosity. Then in associative ability, instinctive framework buildings. I've got to understand how the whole bloody thing fits together in some ways, and I'm not satisfied until I can see that. Psychologically androgynous, having characteristics both male and female. For example, extroverted and introverted, aggressive and nurturing at the same time, sensitive and rigid, dominant and submissive, conservative yet risk-seeking, humble and proud, and a sense of, as Csikszentmihalyi said, sunny pessimism. So these people with all these opposing traits can be really a pain in the neck sometimes to be with, but it's because of this opposition, the psychological opposition, that you juxtapose the previously unassociated, and you find the associations between previously unassociated fields, and you can substantially improve your output by doing this. And then energy, the ability to sustain concentrated attention for long periods of time, and I mean 36, 48 hours without sleep and things like that. When you're really on a jag, it's quite wonderful. I mean, you're exhausted at the end, but boy, it's a trip when you're doing it. And passion and impatience all go together. So these are the traits that we're looking for in people. When you're looking for people in your companies, you want to look for these traits. And that doesn't mean you only have to have these traits, but if you don't have any of these traits in the people in your company, you're competing against people who do. So you need to think about that. So just to finally wrap it up with our recently departed friend Steve Jobs. He said creativity is just connecting things. And that's really the simple essence of it all that we talked about. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel just a little guilty because they really didn't do it. They just saw something, just very much like we've seen today. It seemed obvious to them after a while. That's because they were able to connect experiences that they've had and synthesize new things. And the reason they were able to do that was because they've had more experiences, or they thought more about their experiences than other people. Unfortunately, that's too rare a commodity. A lot of people in our industry haven't had very diverse experiences. So they don't have enough dots to connect, and they end up with very linear solutions without broad perspective, zoom in, zoom out, on the problem. The broader one's understanding of the human experience, zoom in, zoom out, the better design we will have. 100% consistent with everything that we've learned over time. So he obviously really, really understood this, and he was able to turn it into something practical.